Hey there, Philos here. This video is going to be another Greater Rifting build for the Demon Hunter 2.4. This one is based on Marauder and revolves around the Sword of the Ill Will. It's a new sword for the Demon Hunter that increases the damage with Chakram based on the amount of hatred that you have. So this is an optimized build around that setup. So you can see on the screen the skills and abilities, legendary gems, cube powers, passives, everything's right there. And you can see some of the gameplay. So you can take it from here, or you can hang out and watch the extended explanation. Now I can swap over to the game and show the setup. So it's basically your standard Marauder with a few changes. You have your 6-piece Marauder, the Zoe's Secret, the rucksack, and then the difference starts here with the jewelry. So you'll notice we're using the Endless Walk Oculus combo here. This is going to give you damage as you remain stationary, as well as damage reduction while you're moving. And then additionally you have the 85% damage increase while standing in the Oculus ring. And it is worth mentioning that this jewelry combination is potentially viable with just about all Demon Hunter builds. However, the gameplay is kind of awkward and the trade-offs are not always ideal, but I think this setup can take advantage of it pretty well. Because you don't have a generator and you have relatively high uptime on your vault, so that's going to help you maintain the Endless Walk stacks while moving into the Oculus ring. Because when you vault, it only cuts into like 2 of the stacks, and then it's just a moment before you're back to 100. And whereas actually taking a step, it's going to cut into it more, and you're going to travel less. So vault's really good for that. That's the jewelry. You can run Focus and Restraint with the Hellfire Amulet. You would just drop the caltrops for your generator, and then pick up Steady Aim or Ambush for the 5th passive. Now we have the weapons, so you'll notice we have the Dawn equipped, and then the Sword of the Ill Will in the cube. This is going to give you a damage increase with Chakram based on your hatred. And then the Dawn is allowing you to have the 100% vengeance. And you'll notice we're not using the Spines of Seething Hatred. First of all, because there's no room for it, and there's no reason to make Chakram a generator. It's not adding anything to the build. The cost is so cheap. With 100% uptime on Seethe, you're going to have plenty of hatred to just spam your Chakram the whole time without going through the trouble of making it a generator. And I'm actually wearing the Dawn and cubing the Sword of the Ill Will. You can do it the other way around. I do think the Dawn is preferred, mostly because of the higher DPS. And you also get Discipline on the crossbow, whereas on the sword you can't get the Discipline. If you don't have a good Dawn, you might just use the Sword of the Ill Will. A little bit easier, I think, to get the sword with good rolls than the Dawn. But, I mean, to be fair, both of these items with ideal rolls are going to be pretty rare, so just kind of use what you have better, and they both work. But I do think it is ideal to have the Dawn equipped. And then lastly, we have the bracers. Because we're not using a generator, we can't use the Wraps of Clarity, and there aren't very many bracers that are adding value to the build, so I have APD here just for the occasional toughness gain. Zay's Stone of Vengeance, you do have a chance to stun the enemies, and you can also get chance to stun on your gloves as a secondary, and chance to freeze on the belt as a secondary. Going to increase the value of that a little bit. Not extremely significant here. You're not going to get value from your bracers really. Reaper Wraps, you don't need the hatred, so kind of a dead slot there. Okay, so that's the idea and some of the differences from the standard setup. Now I'm going to talk about the skills and abilities. I'm going to touch base on why we're using these skills and what's going on here. So Typical, we have the polar station here to trigger your Call of the Week, as well as your Bane of the Trapped. We have Chakram with the Razor Disc for the damage and the range. Similar to the cluster arrow, the range on this one here is really crazy, so you're going to get value from your old sentries throughout the rift, as well as Zays. You'll notice in the gameplay, the range, this rune, none of the other Chakram runes behave the way that one does, so pretty straightforward with that. Not very much options here. And then we have Vault with Tumble for the mobility, so you can jump into the Oculus rings, as I mentioned, without losing many of your Endless Walk stacks. We have Vengeance with Seethe, the Hatred, combined with the Visage of Goons for the Dark Heart rune. It's going to give you the damage reduction. We have the Companion for the Marauder value. You get all your companions. Then we have Bait the Trap for the damage increase. Now for the passives, we got Custom Engineering for the additional sentry and the duration increase. Awareness for the cheat death. Call of the Week for the damage. And then here we have Blood Vengeance for the damage from the Sword of the Ill Will, as well as the Discipline generation. This is going to help you maintain discipline as you're vaulting into the Oculus circles. It's kind of an issue. You run out of discipline, you have to walk into the circles, and then you lose your Endless Walk stack. So I noticed it was really nice. Not only do you get the damage from the Hatred, but you also get the discipline, allowing you to utilize the Oculus ring better. So that's the skills and abilities. I already glanced over the itemization, so now I'm going to actually talk about the stat priority. It's pretty standard for the most part. You do want to get your cooldown reduction to have 100% vengeance. Depending on the weapon setup that you're running and the rolls that you have, you might need more or less cooldown reduction. I have a 63 on the vengeance. It is a range here, 50 to 65. If you actually wear the Dawn, you have to make sure you have a good roll. Alternatively, like I said, you can put the Dawn in the cube and then wear the Sword of the Ill Will, but this also has a range, 1 to 1.4, so yeah, I mean, it's kind of a rough situation, kind of hard to itemize, but you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just work with what you have and it'll be fine. We have cooldown reduction, resource reduction, sentry damage on the shoulders. Typical rolls, dual crit Vit on the gloves, sentry damage on the chest, and toughness modifiers as well on your armor, belt, pants, boots, same old. Chakram on the boots, going to be important, as well as crit chance chakram on the helmet, crit chance physical damage on the bracers, dual crit on the neck with the physical damage, and then dual crit on the rings as well. And here I have to use one of these rolls to get cooldown reduction. You can, like I said, you can kind of shift around, do what you gotta do. I do think it would be preferred if I were to move the cooldown from the ring to the weapon instead of having area damage on my weapon. Would like that to be cooldown reduction. And then I could drop the cooldown reduction on this ring for crit chance. That would be ideal. I'm not perfectly optimized here, but it's pretty close. It's a solid setup. Now for the legendary gems. Standard here, we got Zay's Stone of Vengeance for the damage, Bane of the Trapped for the damage, and then Teguk for the damage and toughness. Not really much to say on that. Now I can glance over the paragon points. There's one thing different here, and that is the maximum hatred. Because you're using the Sword of the Ill Will, you're gaining damage with Chakram based on the hatred. So you're going to get good value out of that. You're going to want to max that out. Movement speed to 25%, and then your dexterity. On the offense, get your cooldown to 100% vengeance, and then crit damage, crit chance, attack speed last. On the defense, same old here. Bottom to top, skipping life regen. And then on utility, the resource reduction first, that way you can maintain your hatred while spending, and then area damage, and whatever, life on hit last. Okay, now I'm going to jump back over to some more gameplay, and I'm just going to kind of talk about the build and how to play it, some tips and techniques. So, as I mentioned, we have the Oculus Ring and the Endless Walk combination. A lot of the playstyle is going to be around that, in addition to the standard Marauder stuff. So, you got your sentry placement, your Tagug, your Caltrops, your cooldowns, your casting Seethe and Companion, and then spamming Chakrams. So the gameplay is pretty simple. At the most basic level, you're just running around spamming Chakram. But you do have to try to find a spot that you can plant in that's safe. Not like that one, so it is kind of an investment in the spot that you choose to stay in, and it can be risky. The gameplay is kind of awkward, as I mentioned as well, and you can go with the focus and restraint setup and you're going to have similar performance here. But wanted to run this one, kind of touch base on this setup. And yeah, so as the monsters are dying, they're spawning the ring from the Oculus, and you're going to want to try to stand in that as much as possible while standing still. And this is where I was kind of like fumbling around. I died a lot here. I'm pretty inexperienced with this setup, so it's kind of awkward for me to play. With more experience, you could be doing this a lot better. So keep that in mind. I'm not exactly struggling on a 75, but it's just a little harder to play than some of the other builds. And I'm less familiar with this setup, so... And then, so on top of the ring situation, you also have the convention of elements as well. Like usual, you do want to try to make sure that you're planted in a stationary spot in the Oculus ring while you have physical on the convention. That's going to be when you're doing the real big damage. And the uptime on all of the damage modifiers, the Endless Walk, Convention of Elements, you know, the Oculus Ring, all these things, it's not 100% uptime, but they are really strong damage modifiers, so even though they're not present all the time, like the focus and restraint, it's still really good value when you are able to take advantage of it. So the gameplay is a little bit more interesting and fun than this regular focus and restraint, but it can be kind of a hassle to play with it. And this is the first run that I did with the setup. The other footage that you saw throughout the video was the second run. The second run was a lot smoother. I was more comfortable. You know, after maybe an hour or two of playing the build, you kind of get in the flow of doing it. But I've only played this build for probably about 30 minutes, less than an hour, so pretty unfamiliar with the rotation and everything. And I'm actually missing a little bit of cooldown, so I don't exactly have 100% vengeance. That's kind of an issue here. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not perfectly optimized with this setup. But it is a strong build. It is viable for 75 to 80. I don't think it's the strongest, but it is a decent build, and it's a lot of fun to play once you kind of get the hang of it. So that was a double elite pack, and they died pretty quick. A good example of when you get really good value. But it is very AoE heavy. You do want to kind of overextend and aggro a lot. If you're fighting two elites at once, that's probably a good thing. But other than that, I mean, that's pretty much it. You can see, you can kind of get the idea. If you were running focus and restraint, as I said earlier, you would just drop the bait the trap, put your generator there, and then, you know, the gameplay is a lot more straightforward at that point. So, and then the Rift Guardian kill here. Not the best single target damage, but it is actually surprisingly strong on the single target. As long as you're able to just kind of stand there and blast him, which Perdition, kind of a problematic Guardian for that. You do have to kind of jump around and avoid his mechanics. Lacking the Wraps of Clarity, more squishy than other Demon Hunter setup, but you do have a higher damage potential with lacking the Generator. You have Bait the Trap for the extra crit chance. And then the Endless Walk combination with the Oculus Ring. It all adds up, and the damage modifiers are really strong. So, solid build. I actually made this video at a viewer's request. I had somebody ask about it, and at first I thought the build was pretty weak, but it turns out it's actually stronger than I expected, so I wanted to go ahead and throw this together. So I know there are a lot of people that are interested in the Chakram setup, and is it viable for higher greater rifts? Definitely is, to a certain extent. There you go. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoy.